One of the most striking things to me about grunge is the visual history. From the iconic album covers to the concert posters, the magazines, the culture itself, it's an entire language. So what is the feeling of grunge? The word itself sounds a little bit derogatory, a bit dirty. The term was created by Bruce Pavitt of Sub Pop to market the Seattle sound, but it kind of unfairly lumps together these bands with fundamentally different influences, both visually and musically. I'd say the feeling of grunge is raw, it's passionate, and it might actually be a little dirty. You have the gravelly distortion and the punk influence. You have the atmosphere, depression, and isolation. And that all translates exceptionally well into a visual story. And this story didn't emerge out of nowhere. It came from an economic downturn and a period of undeniable pessimism. In the early 70s, a billboard at the Seattle-Tacoma airport read, "Will the last person leaving Seattle turn the lights out?" Because Boeing had just gone through a series of layoffs. It may seem unrelated, but it's actually not. The economic position of Seattle at the time freed up lots of real estate space, making it possible to put together an experimental studio for relatively cheap. You had places like Reciprocal Recording, a tiny building run by Jack and Dino, in which Nirvana recorded Bleach, and Mudhoney and Soundgarden cut their first demos. Then there's London Bridge Studio, sort of the mecca of grunge, founded in an old Shoreline warehouse. This place is responsible for the recordings of Facelift, Temple of the Dog, 10, Jar of Flies, Blind Melon's debut album, and many more. While the music felt chaotic, the production was actually quite deliberate. There was an unmistakable feeling in that do-it-yourself recording culture. It was blue-collar and industrial. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't pretend to be. And as I said, there are some fundamental differences between the styles of these bands. With Nirvana, you have grotesque paintings drawn by Kurt and anatomical figures. Alice in Chains gives us a metallic-tinged wasteland. Soundgarden, once again, gritty and metallic imagery. Pearl Jam stays truer to the roots of classic rock, rule of thirds, typography, and texture. When you go back and look at the catalog of album covers for Mudhoney, The Melvins, or Green River, you see the post-punk influence, the surreal characters, and the comic-like drawings. And you don't have to look very closely to see a fixation on anatomy, grotesque imagery, and the macabre. Maybe the most notable is the in utero album art, which features a transparent medical mannequin with angel wings. The concept comes from Kurt Cobain's childhood curiosity and ultimately his feeling of chronic pain and decay. The music videos for Black Hole Sun and many of Alice in Chains' songs hinge on visceral distortion, body parts, and decay. But it's not just an attempt at being edgy or absurdist. This style effectively strips the rock star persona away from what it used to be, the grandiose glamour and charisma. It bleeds into a much more real, human side of rock music. No matter the fame and MTV interviews, there was a palpable vulnerability to these artists. And I would be remiss to not mention one of the most important influences of both the music and the visuals of the time: the substances, marijuana, heroin, alcohol. There's something about substance use that fundamentally changes you. It lets you see the world without a filter. In the 90s, seemingly had no filter. The imagery isn't there to look cool or act as a marketing ploy. They are depictions from sick, troubled, battling minds. The heaviness, the transparency, the creeping crawl. It's representative of that feeling of being stuck in place as many of us are. The world is moving rapidly, but we get caught up with the wrong things sometimes. We also get so engrossed in the music and the idolization of the artists we love that we forget about the designers and photographers who played a crucial role in shaping the memories of grunge. Robert Fisher famously took ideas from Kurt Cobain and gave us the Nevermind cover and promotional materials, acting as a creative director from Bleach until the very end. Kevin Westenberg gave us the iconic Super Unknown and Down on the Upside cover portraits. Karen Mason Blair left her mark on the fabric of grunge with thousands more portrait contributions. Frank Kozik made some of the most iconic screen prints for Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Mudhoney before his legendary runs with The Offspring, Primus, and Helmet. But if you want to point out one person who truly codified this language of Seattle, you have to talk about Art Chantry. While the rest of the design world was rushing towards the first computers, he was quite literally digging through the garbage. He rejected digital tools, preferring to use industrial materials, old trade manuals, and found patterns from the 50s. He's an artist who looked at the mistakes of low-budget printing, like blurred ink, the misaligned colors, the rough texture of a cheap photocopy, and realized they actually made up the aesthetic. And then some bands took a more independent approach. Jeff Ament of Pearl Jam was a skilled graphic designer, starting with the album art for Temple of the Dog. His designs and penmanship became part of the optical brand for not just Pearl Jam, but for grunge as a whole. His album art for 10 acted as illustration, lyric sheet, and a social commentary. And his now iconic Stickman logo that he created for the Alive single lives on many people's shirts and skin forever. Buzz Osborne of the Melvins, alongside his wife Mackie, moved beyond the era's cliches to create a sophisticated, surrealist aesthetic that turned records like Houdini into high art pieces. This depth of concept was mirrored by Tad Doyle of the band Tad, leaning into the provocative or bizarre style, most famously seen on the covers of 8-Way Santa and Inhaler. Similarly, Mudhoney's Mark Arm acted as a high-concept curator, letting the punk influence shine through into the band's imagery. It really comes with the territory of being multidisciplinary. When you spend so much of your time creating, you branch out to any medium you can. Pair that with the limited budget of Sub Pop in the early 90s, and you get some of the most tasteful, raw DIY visual art. For musicians, the artwork is another important chapter of the story. But the grunge aesthetic we think of wasn't born on its own. It's a child of the punk ransom note style, high exposure photocopies, halftone printing, and impactful photography. Often the apparent lack of cohesion and intention was a design method in and of itself, a rejection of the mainstream. When it came to typography, the goal wasn't legibility, but again, a rebellion against the norm. David Carson at Ray Gun magazine was a master at using text as a visual tool. The layout was a bit chaotic and touted as one of the first grunge design styles. It was a way for the reader to engage with the page as a piece of art rather than just a source of information. This anti-design approach effectively mirrors the emotion and distortion of the music at the time. In a way, it was another act of defiance against the bright corporate perfection of the 80s. As for the fashion, it was more of a byproduct of the environment and attitude rather than a conscious choice. Some people today worship grunge stars as fashion icons, but that is the complete opposite of anything they were trying to achieve. The flannels and the boots were just another extension of this dark, damp, industrial Seattle feel. After all, they weren't just rockers. They weren't pretentious. To label the style lazy is a bit of a misstep, though. It was more like calculated apathy. This lack of pretension is exactly what made the visual language so potent. Because they weren't trying to sell you a brand or a lifestyle. They were just being themselves. And before we had access to every band's complete catalog all the time, we had to actually buy the music. Going into the store, fumbling with CDs or records until you finally see something that hits you. That's part of the magic of old album covers. That was the only bridge to connect you to the music, to whatever you were going to spend the next hour experiencing. The liner notes, the jewel cases, the inlays, the promotional flats, and the stickers. It's actually one of the prettier aspects of capitalism, in my opinion. There are millions of people out there that know the cover of Abbey Road, Nevermind, or Dark Side of the Moon, but couldn't tell you a single track from the album. Why is that? It's because the visuals actually transcend the music in a sense. Of course, the music is the product itself, the end result of the process. But the visuals tie everything together. They package it up, ready to ship out for our pleasure. I guess this video, and hopefully series, is my way of trying to contribute my thoughts in some minuscule sense to this visual style that has been influential in so many of our lives. Let me know in the comments, what genre do you want to see me tackle next? Psychedelic rock, punk, black metal? Thank you for watching, guys. Peace.